The next part of our survey of biological macromolecules are the lipids. Now, lipids are a diverse group of hydrophobic molecules, meaning they don't mix well with water. And there are a number of kinds. They include the fats and oils, they include the phospholipids, they include the steroids. Now, most of the time when you hear about lipids, you're thinking about fats and oils. The fats and oils in the foods, stored body fat, and so forth. They're all triglycerides. So they're made of a glycerol and 3 fatty acids, and they're a major energy source. In fact, they provide 9 kilocalories per gram, whereas carbohydrates are good for 4 kilocalories per gram. So these are a more concentrated source of energy. Now, there are many kinds of fats, and you've heard of most of them, like saturated fats and monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats and trans fats and these kind of things. They only differ by the structure of the fatty acid. So here is a drawing of a fatty acid. Now, a triglyceride would have 3 of these. And of course, a fatty acid is going to have an acid group or a carboxyl group at one end and a chain, a carbon chain, made of carbons and hydrogens. Now, what differs is the structure of the fatty acid. Now, I made this carbon chain 8 carbons long. It could be longer, it could be shorter, so they don't have to be this long. So fatty acids can vary in how long the chain is. They can also vary in degree of saturation. So saturated means full. In this case, we're talking about hydrogens. Now, if every carbon atom forms 4 bonds, no more, no less, and every available bond has got a hydrogen on it, that means it cannot hold anymore. It is a saturated fatty acid. It is full of hydrogens. Now, an unsaturated fatty acid is missing hydrogens in 1 or more locations. So if it's missing hydrogens in 1 location, it is monounsaturated. If it is missing in 2 or more locations, we call that polyunsaturated. So let's make this unsaturated. And I'll remove hydrogens here. But the carbon still has to have 4 bonds, so that means I've got to put a double bond here. So I now have hydrogens missing in 1 location. This is now a monounsaturated fatty acid. Now, if I add more of these, it would be polyunsaturated. And of course, these locations can be anywhere in any number. That's why there's so many different kinds. Now, saturated fats tend to be solids at room temperature. Unsaturated fats tend to be liquids or oils at room temperature. Also, saturated fats tend to be more chemically stable. They tend to hold up better under repetitive cooking. So you may have heard of hydrogenated oils, like partially hydrogenated soybean oil or whatever. Hydrogenation, adding hydrogens back to make it saturated, to thicken it up. And to make it more heat stable. Now, there are some drawbacks, and of course saturated fats are less healthy. That is a drawback to hydrogenation. But another drawback is trans fats. Notice that the 2 hydrogens are on the same side. Okay, that's called the CIS configuration. If the 2 hydrogens were on opposite sides, such as here and here, that's called the trans configuration. And trans fats are basically unsaturated fats that act like saturated fats, and they too are rather unhealthy for us when we eat a lot of them. So this would be what a trans fat looks like on the molecular level, and of course natural unsaturated fats are more like this, not like that. Now, those are the triglycerides, but there are other kinds of lipids as well, such as phospholipids. A phospholipid is made of a phosphate and 2 fatty acids. Now, I drew this as a simple little cartoon type drawing. Now, the peculiar thing about this molecule, this phospholipid, is that the phosphate end is hydrophilic. It will mix with water or attract the water, whereas fatty acids are repelled by water because they are hydrophobic. So if you placed a bunch of phospholipids in water, what would happen to them? They would form a phospholipid bilayer. In other words, if you have water outside and water inside, the phosphates would attract to the water, and the water would repel the fatty acids. And since misery loves company, these fatty acids will associate with each other, forcing this into a membrane made of a phospholipid bilayer. So this would be the water outside of a cell. This would be the water inside of a cell. So that's what phospholipids are for. Now, steroids, also known as sterols, are not made of fatty acids. They're made of fused carbon rings that look something like this. There are many examples, such as cholesterol, vitamin D, plant sterols, anabolic steroids, which is synthetic testosterone, sex hormones are steroids, and so are the corticosteroid hormones produced by the adrenal cortex. So this is an overview of lipids.